After I was reborn, I gave my sister-in-law's life-swapping charm to a dog. My sister-in-law loved praying for blessings, and she would give away the lucky charms she got from the temple for free. At my daughter's 1-month party, she gave me my first charm. My perfectly healthy daughter suddenly started running a high fever all night. Meanwhile, her premature son, who was supposed to live in an incubator for years, was suddenly cured and brought home. Before my daughter's SATs, she gave me a second charm. My daughter, a straight A student, bombed the test with a score of 500. Meanwhile, her slacker son scored a near-perfect 15. Just before my daughter's grad school acceptance letter was due, she gave me a third charm. My daughter suddenly contracted an STD and, consumed by depression, jumped to her death from a building. Meanwhile, her son suddenly broke up with his girlfriend, dumped his playboy lifestyle, and threw himself into his studies, landing the full scholarship to study abroad that my daughter had always dreamed of. At my daughter's funeral, she gave me a fourth charm. Her late-stage breast cancer suddenly transferred to me. As I lay dying, I clearly heard her whisper "thank you," as she firmly closed my eyes for me. When I opened them again, I was back on the day my sister-in-law gave me the first charm. "Chloe, dear, this is a blessed lucky charm I just got from the temple. It took me a lot of effort to get. If it wasn't for Mia's 1-month party, I wouldn't have dreamed of giving it away." Something wrapped in talisman paper was suddenly shoved into my hands. I looked up sharply. My sister-in-law was standing right in front of me. Her lips were curved into a smile, but her eyes were cold and empty. Her nails dug into my hand, and the pain shot through me. When I looked down at what she'd given me, I realized I had been reborn. My daughter's cry snapped me back to reality. Today was her 1-month party, and my sister-in-law had brought a so-called blessed charm from a temple as a gift. The charm felt heavy in my hand. It was embroidered with the character for luck in gold thread, and inside was a blood-red bead that gave me a strange, unsettling feeling. In my last life, my sister-in-law gave me 4 of these charms, and bit by bit, she and her son stole my daughter's life and mine. The first time was at my daughter's 1-month party. My perfectly healthy daughter started burning up for no reason. We went to several hospitals, but no one could find the cause. It got so bad that my tiny baby didn't even have the strength to cry anymore. It felt like she could slip away at any moment. But on that very day, my sister-in-law's premature son made a miraculous recovery. He had been frail and tiny, but he suddenly became chubby, healthy, and adorable. The second time was right before my daughter's SATs. My daughter had always been an excellent student. After the test, she confidently promised me she wouldn't let me down. When the scores were released, we were both stunned. No matter how badly she might have done, there was no way she could have only scored a 5. That day, my sister-in-law spammed the family group chat, bragging about how her slacker son had scored a 1550 and was being courted by Ivy League schools. My daughter retook the test, got into her dream university, and worked hard enough to earn a spot in a graduate program. That's when my sister-in-law gave me the third charm. I was at work when the police called to tell me my daughter had committed suicide by jumping off a building. When I rushed to the scene, all I saw was her mangled body. People were pointing and whispering, "That's the girl with the STD. I saw her the other day, covered in red, swollen sores. So disgusting. People like her should just die. Why was she even competing with us for a spot in grad school?" And on that day, my sister-in-law's womanizing son cleaned up his act and snagged the study abroad scholarship that should have been my daughter's. I numbly arranged my daughter's funeral. On the day she was buried, I received the last charm. "Mia is gone, but you have to take care of yourself. It breaks my heart to see you like this." After I took that charm, I felt a sharp, inexplicable pain in my chest. A hospital checkup revealed it was late-stage breast cancer. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law, who had been diagnosed with breast cancer long ago, threw a huge party, claiming her prayers had moved the heavens and her terminal illness was miraculously cured. My health deteriorated rapidly, and soon I was in the ICU. My mother-in-law, thinking the treatment was too expensive, dragged my husband away, leaving me helpless in the hospital. The moment before I took my last breath, my sister-in-law appeared, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Thank you and your daughter for paving the way for me and my son, and taking all our bad luck. Remembering the tragedy of my past life, my hands trembled, and the charm fell to the floor. My sister-in-law immediately snatched it up and shot me an angry look. "Chloe, what's the meaning of this? You think my gift is cheap?" Her voice was loud and shrill. My mother-in-law heard and rushed over. "Your sister-in-law was kind enough to pray for that useless girl of yours, and now you're being picky? Because I had a daughter and my sister-in-law had a son. My mother-in-law was always shamelessly biased." My husband, Ben, walked over, a look of disgust on his face. "Stop making a scene. It's embarrassing." Seeing them ganging up on me like that, I couldn't help but laugh coldly to myself. Ben's family had been dirt poor. If it wasn't for my family, they'd still be living in a shack in the middle of nowhere. And now they had the nerve to call me embarrassing. I took a deep breath, suppressing the volcanic hatred inside me. I looked up at my sister-in-law with a smile. "Why would I ever look down on such a thoughtful gift from you?" She nodded, satisfied, and shoved the charm back into my hand. "Then make sure you hold on to it this time. This charm is really powerful. It'll definitely protect our Mia and help her grow up healthy and strong." She shot a meaningful glance at my daughter in her cradle and smirked. Seeing that I'd accepted the charm, my sister-in-law turned and walked away pleased. I made an excuse to slip out of the reception hall and took a cab to a lab. An hour later, the results were in. There was nothing wrong with the charm itself. It wasn't contaminated with any viruses or pathogens. So why did my daughter and I suffer so much in my last life? The only thing I could think of was that there was something wrong with the charm that science couldn't explain. Last time, I did as my sister-in-law instructed and hung the charm on Mia. That very night, Mia was up all night with a high fever, vomiting and having diarrhea. The memory of my daughter almost dying while their family happily went to pick up my sister-in-law's son from the hospital made my heart ache with anger. Since she loved having her son steal my daughter's life, I would be more than happy to oblige her this time around. My best friend, Lily, was on a retreat at a temple in the countryside. I asked her to get me a charm that looked identical, complete with a red bead inside. When I got it, I compared the two. You couldn't tell them apart. I tucked the new charm into my bag, then took a little walk outside the reception hall with the one from my sister-in-law, finding it a new home. Once everything was taken care of, I went back inside and tied the charm onto my daughter. When dinner started, Mia was brought out to receive blessings from the guests. My sister-in-law held Mia, beaming. She's such a lovable child. To an outsider, you would think Mia was her own daughter. Then she announced with a wide smile, "It's such a good day today. I think I'll bring my little guy home too." She looked incredibly excited. But I was even more excited for her to see her darling son today. After the party, Ben drove me and his mother home. I was resting with my eyes closed when I was startled awake by a cry. My daughter, who had been sleeping soundly, was suddenly wailing. I touched her forehead. It was burning up. Ben turned around impatiently. "Now what? You two are nothing but trouble." His mother spat and snapped, "Cry, cry, cry. There's nothing likable about this child. We should have just brought Henry home instead." Henry was my sister-in-law's son. My mother-in-law had always wanted to bring him home and raise him herself, but he was too frail and had to stay in the hospital. I clenched my fists in anger but kept my voice calm. "Can we please take Mia to the hospital first? I think her forehead is a little..." A ringing phone cut me off. My mother-in-law answered, her face lighting up. She patted Ben's shoulder. "Let's go pick up your nephew. Your sister-in-law says he's all better, doing great." Because my sister-in-law thought the city hospitals were too expensive, Henry was in a hospital in a small town several hours away. When I suggested taking Mia to a city hospital first, my mother-in-law smirked. "Must be nice to have money. Even your hospitals have to be the expensive ones. Your daughter is just so precious, isn't she?" Ben was a total mama's boy with no backbone. He pulled over and left me and a crying Mia on the side of the road. "You're rich anyway. Just call a cab." I was spoiled growing up and had a bit of a temper, which most men couldn't stand. Only Ben had put up with it, letting me yell at him whenever I wanted. Now I see he was just after my family's money. He changed completely after we got married. The car he was driving was a gift from my dad, and now he was using it to abandon his wife and child on the street. I calmed myself down and called a car to take us to the city hospital. At my insistence, the hospital ran a full battery of tests on Mia. I stayed by her side all night, never leaving for a second. The next day, the results came in. Mia had just caught a small chill at the party, which caused a low-grade fever. Other than that, she was perfectly fine. Hearing the doctor's diagnosis, I finally relaxed. Mia's fever was gone. I held her and took a cab home. As I walked in the door, I could hear my sister-in-law's laughter. "See? I told you praying works. Look at my son, he's strong as an ox now." "Sick? What sickness?" "My son was just a preemie, that's all. Look at him now, he's fine." I walked in to find a crowd of people in the living room. My mother-in-law was holding a baby, grinning from ear to ear, while my sister-in-law chatted with the neighbors. When she saw me, my mother-in-law's smile vanished. She snorted coldly. "So the money pit is back? How much did the hospital bill come to this time? I told you you should be like your sister-in-law and just pray. You wouldn't have to waste all that money." I looked at Henry in my mother-in-law's arms. He was wiggling constantly and sticking his tongue out. I smiled sincerely. He's got so much energy. You can tell he's going to be successful one day. Hearing my praise, my sister-in-law beamed even brighter. "Of course. My son is nothing like your daughter. He's going to make our family proud." My mother-in-law was so pleased she took off the gold bracelet I'd bought her and handed it to my sister-in-law. "Well said. From now on, my grandson gets only the best formula." Watching their happy little family scene, I couldn't help but laugh coldly to myself. Her precious grandson might not even be able to drink formula. Over the next few days, I gave my daughter the vitamin drops prescribed by the hospital. My sister-in-law saw this and scoffed. "What good are vitamins? You'd be better off praying like I do." She then carried her son around, visiting all the neighbors to show off how healthy he was. "Look, my son is already growing teeth. Is that something a normal baby can do?" she'd boast, prying open Henry's mouth for everyone to see. When Henry bit her finger hard enough to leave a mark, she praised him for being so strong and powerful. A few days later, Henry could already crawl. My sister-in-law immediately flooded social media with videos. "A genius child blessed by the heavens. Can you believe it? So little and already has teeth and can crawl." My daughter, on the other hand, was so quiet even her cries were faint. Ben looked at Henry with envy, then pouted at me. "I told you you're too skinny. A woman with a healthier figure like your sister-in-law is the one who can have a healthy baby. Not only are you rail thin, but the baby you had is so lifeless." I glanced at him without a word and continued to feed my daughter. A few days later, my sister-in-law was pounding on my door first thing in the morning. When I opened it, her face was covered in bloody scratches. I looked at her, confused. "What happened to you? Did you get in a fight?" She ignored my question and barged straight into my room. She went to the crib and yanked open the curtain. Mia was still sleeping peacefully. My sister-in-law finally looked at me. "You haven't been mistreating Mia, have you? Like waking her up super early or something?" I shook my head. "Of course not. You know Mia isn't a strong baby. Sometimes she wakes up even earlier than I do, and ends up waking me." She nodded, then warned me again and again to take good care of Mia. She looked so worried you'd almost think Mia was her own child. Over the next few days, my sister-in-law appeared with more and more scratches. Even my mother-in-law noticed something was wrong. But my sister-in-law insisted she was fine and kept asking about Mia's health. "Has Mia been fussy lately? You're her mother. You need to discipline her." I brought Mia out from the room. She was lying quietly in my arms, sleeping soundly. My sister-in-law suddenly leaned in close to check Mia's mouth. Watching her paranoid behavior, I almost burst out laughing, but I kept a straight, innocent face. "What's wrong, sis? Mia's a bit of a late bloomer. She hasn't even grown any teeth yet." She seemed not to hear me, muttering to herself, "This is impossible. How could this happen?" A scream from my mother-in-law cut through her thoughts. We rushed into my sister-in-law's room. Henry was on the floor, glaring at us viciously, his mouth smeared with blood. My mother-in-law was slumped on the ground, clutching her ears as blood dripped from between her fingers. When she saw my sister-in-law, she exploded with rage. "This is the good son you raised. I just wanted to hold him, and he bit me." Just then, a dog barked outside, and Henry let out a woof in response. My sister-in-law rushed to the door and threw it open. It was the old security guard from our complex, delivering some shopping vouchers from property management. He was holding a leash, and on the other end was a big yellow dog. Around the dog's neck was a bright red lucky charm. My sister-in-law whipped her head around, her face pale with fury, and stared at me. Through clenched teeth, she asked, "Why is the charm I gave Mia on a dog's neck?" My sister-in-law glared at me as if she wanted to tear me apart. I looked at her with an innocent expression. "But you're the one who taught me to be kind and spread good fortune, right? This dog helps the guard protect our community. I just wanted it to have some good luck too, so I gave it the charm." My sister-in-law looked at Henry, who had crawled out of the room with blood all over his mouth. She understood everything now and pointed a finger at me, her voice rising in anger. "That charm was for you. How could you give it to someone else? Giving away your good fortune will bring you bad karma. Don't you know that?" Seeing her slip up, I quickly pretended not to understand. "How can giving a blessing bring bad karma? You're the one who gave this blessing to me in the first place." My question stumped her. She froze for a moment, then softened her tone. "It's just that I got that charm specifically for Mia. It hurts my feelings that you would just give it away. Listen to me, go get the charm back." I shook my head. "You know how dogs run all over the place. What if it picks up some germs? Mia's health is already so fragile." "Cut the crap," she snapped, suddenly losing her patience. She reached out to grab the charm from the dog's neck. The yellow dog suddenly went wild and bit down hard on her hand. At the same time, Henry leaped up from the floor and sank his teeth into her other hand. My sister-in-law screamed in pain. The scene descended into chaos. Inside, my mother-in-law was whimpering. Outside, the guard was trying to pull back his dog, Ben was trying to pull Henry off, and my sister-in-law stood there with both hands dripping blood, a mangled mess. I just stood to the side, holding Mia, completely serene. Finally, the guard managed to drag his dog away. My sister-in-law collapsed to her knees, sobbing hysterically. Ben rubbed his forehead, annoyed. "What is all this mess?" He looked over at me and his anger flared up again. "Are you dead? What are you just standing there for? Help." I widened my eyes innocently and held up Mia. "Honey, my hands are full. Do you want Mia to get woken up by all this?" The thought of another crying baby made Ben even more agitated. He resignedly called for an ambulance and explained the situation. The dog's panic seemed to have set Henry off, who was now howling uncontrollably. Having no other choice, Ben locked him in a metal cage. My sister-in-law saw this and threw a tantrum on the floor. "How could you lock my son in a cage?" "Fine, I'll let him out and put him next to you." Ben's shout silenced her. She looked at the snarling Henry in the cage, and her fury immediately deflated. By the time the ambulance arrived, both my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were weak from blood loss and could barely speak. When Ben heard how much the ambulance and emergency services would cost, he looked troubled, then turned to me. I knew exactly what he was thinking. He didn't earn much, and since we got married, he was always asking my family for money. Sure enough, he said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "If you hadn't given the charm to that dog, my sister-in-law wouldn't have tried to get it back. You should ask your family for the money to cover her medical bills, right?" Looking at his shameless face, I sneered inwardly but kept my expression compliant. "Of course. It's all my fault. Of course, I had no intention of asking my family for money." After Ben left for the hospital, I went to a loan company and got the contract. When I arrived at the hospital, Ben was sitting exhausted in the waiting area. His eyes lit up when he saw me. "Did you get the money?" I nodded. "I even paid the bills already. But this needs a signature from a family member, preferably immediate family, so you'll have to sign it, honey." Ben was so tired he didn't even glance at the papers before signing his name. A few hours later, my mother-in-law was wheeled out, her ears stitched up and her face pale. My sister-in-law was even worse off, with both hands wrapped in thick bandages. Henry couldn't be diagnosed, so he was fitted with a muzzle. My sister-in-law started to argue, but a fierce glare from my mother-in-law shut her up. As much as she doted on her grandson, she wasn't keen on another trip to the operating room. On the way back, my mother-in-law insisted on sitting in the front passenger seat, refusing to be anywhere near Henry. She pointed at my sister-in-law and scolded her. Look at the child you raised. Mia is so quiet, but this one is like a wild animal. Ha! That's not what she used to say. Before, Mia was just a money pit and a sickly thing in her eyes, someone she didn't even want to hold. Then, leaning back in her seat, she casually said to Ben, I think Henry is a lost cause. Your brother is out of town, so you and Chloe need to hurry up and have another one. Ben pouted. It's not my fault. Her body is the one that's failing. His mother scoffed. If you can't have one, just keep trying until you have a son. I knew they were shameless, but I never imagined they were this shameless. Their family was so poor they couldn't afford a bathroom in this city, yet they acted like they had a royal dynasty to continue. Before I could say anything, my sister-in-law piped up. What do you mean Henry is a lost cause? He's just got a lot of energy lately. He'll be perfectly fine in a few days. I chose that moment to speak up, pulling out a forged medical report. You're right. And I can't have any more children, so the family's future rests on Henry. Seeing the report, my mother-in-law clutched her chest and demanded that Ben divorce me immediately. While Ben was still thinking, my sister-in-law protested. But we have Henry, don't we? Besides, even if Ben finds someone else, she might not be as good as Chloe. I wanted to leave, but my sister-in-law was desperate to make me stay. If she wanted to swap fates, I was going to let her swap until she was satisfied. I looked at my mother-in-law with a pleasing expression and handed her a bank card. There's about 100 grand on this card. It's a gift to show my respect. I know I've let Ben down. After receiving the card, my mother-in-law finally nodded in satisfaction. Now that's more like it. Seeing how sensible I was, and that her mother-in-law had dropped the subject of divorce, my sister-in-law breathed a sigh of relief. Then she pulled a second lucky charm out of her bag. The last one lost all its luck because of you. Keep this one on you, and maybe you'll be able to have a son. I thought my sister-in-law would take a break after what happened. I didn't expect her to produce a second charm so quickly. I smiled and accepted it, then immediately sent a text to my friend Lily. With her newfound windfall, my mother-in-law forgot all about her usual lectures on frugality and signed up for a luxury tour package. Ben was unhappy, complaining that I gave his mother money but not him, even though he was the biggest victim. I didn't get angry. Instead, I gave him a card too. You've always liked those model kits and watches, right? There's money on the card. Go buy them. Ben was so happy he tried to kiss me, but I dodged him. The more ecstatic they became, the more excited I felt. This was just the appetizer. There was plenty more to come. My sister-in-law was afraid I'd get rid of the charm again, so she checked every day to make sure I was wearing it. I had already mailed her charm away. The one I wore was from Lily. A few days later, Lily called and said the results were in, but I had to go to the temple in person. I used the excuse of taking Mia to visit my parents and left the house. They were all too busy enjoying their spending spree to pay me any mind. When I got to the temple, Lily rushed out to meet me. She picked up Mia and planted a big kiss on her cheek. How could anyone want to harm such an adorable baby? Your sister-in-law is a monster. I urged her to tell me what was going on, but she was being mysterious. You'll see in a minute. She led me deeper into the temple grounds. Strangely, the further we went, the lighter I felt, and Mia's cheeks grew rosier. At the very end was an ancient, elegant courtyard filled with swirling incense smoke and the pleasant scent of sandalwood. Lily called out playfully, Dad. My friend Chloe is here. Come on out. I knew that Lily's dad had suddenly left to become a monk when she was 3. I never imagined he was now the abbot. A man in red and yellow robes walked out of the room, his face radiating righteousness. When he saw me, his eyes darkened. Truly evil, he said in a low voice. Then, without another word, he threw a handful of incense ash over me. Lily grabbed her dad's arm. Is my Chloe going to be okay? If anything happens to her, I'm done with this whole finding myself thing at your temple. Her dad led me into a room, poured me a cup of tea, and asked me to explain what had happened. I glanced at the charm on his table and told him the whole story. He nodded as if he'd expected it. This isn't the relic of a holy monk. It's from a demonic one. Spiritual practice has paths of both good and evil. These demonic monks kill people to steal their luck. Naturally, Their relics are evil objects. He turned and rummaged through a cabinet, then placed a jade pendant around my neck. This jade will slowly cleanse the evil energy from you and your child. Tonight, when the moon rises, I will perform a ritual to obliterate that evil spirit. That evening, Lily accompanied me to her father's courtyard, where a ritual circle had been drawn with black dog's blood. I stood in the center as instructed. The jade on my chest grew hot, and I could feel a sinister laugh echoing from within my body. Her father began chanting. I started to feel weaker and weaker. After a while, sweat beaded on his forehead, and his chanting grew faster. A black mist began to seep out of my body. I couldn't believe the curse was this deep after just holding the charm for a short time. Begone. As her father sliced his palm and let his blood fall into the circle, the black spirit shrieked in agony. The bead inside the lucky charm shattered. Her father panted, exhausted. Chloe, I've broken the curse. However, the evil spirit absorbed a lot of energy from the world just now. For a short time, the person who cast the spell might see their luck improve, but after that, he didn't finish, but I knew what he meant. A few days later, I returned to our apartment complex, but my key code didn't work. The people who opened the door were strangers. They said they were the new tenants and gave me the landlord's number. Unbelievable. They didn't even bother to tell me they were moving. When I had someone track down their new address, I found Ben lounging by the pool of a villa with a scantily clad woman in his arms. I quickly snapped a few photos and sent them to my lawyer. As I walked in, my sister-in-law, her arms clanking with gold bracelets, came out to greet me with a smirk. I bet you had a rough few days back at your parents' place, what with their cash flow problems and all. My luck, on the other hand, has turned completely. Every stock I buy just skyrockets. I immediately called my parents. They told me the company was just investing heavily in a new branch, so liquid capital was tied up, but their cash flow was perfectly fine. My sister-in-law looked at me with pity. If you behave yourself from now on, maybe I'll throw you and your daughter a few scraps. A nanny brought Henry out. He looked like a normal baby again. My mother-in-law pointed at me arrogantly. How dare a useless woman like you show your face here? I made a call, and my lawyer arrived with the drafted divorce papers. The woman in Ben's arms cooed, "Honey, if you get rid of her, does that mean you can marry me?" My sister-in-law hesitated, then glanced at the gold bracelets on her wrist, and then at me, looking dusty and worn out from my trip to the temple. She didn't stop Ben. Lost in his new life of luxury, Ben signed the papers without a second thought. I couldn't help but laugh out loud at how clueless they all were. They thought I had lost my mind and were about to throw me out. Suddenly, Henry started screaming. Blood poured from his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, and worms began crawling out of his lips. The nanny shrieked and dropped him on the ground. My sister-in-law tried to catch him but lost her footing and fell. My mother-in-law took one look, ran back inside the villa, and locked the door, refusing to open it even when Ben pounded on it. The woman who had been with Ben saw things were going south and bolted faster than anyone. With the signed divorce papers in hand, I turned to leave. But my sister-in-law grabbed my leg. "You bitch. What did you do?" Ben screamed as the worms began to bite him, but they wouldn't come anywhere near me. I kicked her hand away and sneered, "What did I do? You should be asking yourself what you've done." Her face went pale. "Impossible," she muttered. "How could you know?" She clutched her chest and began to convulse. Ben managed to grab his phone and call the police. When they arrived, I looked completely innocent. On the security cameras, it was clear that I hadn't done anything. In fact, I was the one being bullied by them. Before my sister-in-law's eyes, Henry melted into a foul-smelling puddle of black blood. She went insane. No. How could this be? I looked down at her and smiled faintly. You reap what you sow. Did you ever think this would be the outcome when you were hurting others? Ben was barely breathing when he was rushed to the hospital. My mother-in-law came out to find her grandson gone, and her son near death. She screamed and began slapping my sister-in-law across the face. My sister-in-law pulled another charm from somewhere and tried to throw it at me. "Give him back to me. Give me back my son." But as the charm got close to me, it disintegrated on its own. The police had never seen anything so bizarre. They quickly pulled my sister-in-law and mother-in-law apart. My sister-in-law's face was swollen from the slaps, but her eyes were still fixed on me with pure hatred. After giving a statement at the station, I was released. My sister-in-law and mother-in-law's fight was considered a domestic dispute, so the police couldn't hold them. My mother-in-law dragged her to the hospital to pay the bills, stripping her of every valuable she had on her. Dazed, my sister-in-law must have mistaken her mother-in-law for me. She suddenly threw the older woman to the ground. She sat on top of her, punching wildly. "You bitch. It was you. You're the one who ruined me. You ruined my son." She even started biting her. It took several people to pull her off. By the time the ambulance the police called had arrived, my mother-in-law was already dead, her body a mangled mess. My sister-in-law was committed to a psychiatric hospital. Ben was lucky enough to survive, but his brother died in a car crash on his way back after running a red light. Now all of his sister-in-law's debts, including the loan I took out for him, fell on his shoulders. When the debt collectors found him at the hospital, he was still arrogant enough to say his sister-in-law would pay. So I paid him a kind visit and told him the news. His sister-in-law was insane, his mother was dead, and his brother was dead too. "You're the last one left in your precious family line." He looked at me furious. "Don't forget your daughter's last name is Chun." I smiled serenely. "And don't you forget, we're divorced. The baby has my last name now." He coughed up a mouthful of blood and passed out, but the debt collectors had plenty of ways to wake him up. I didn't spare him another thought and went home. Lily had come back with me. Not wanting Mia to see any of that ugliness, I had asked Lily to take her to my parents' house first. My parents were thrilled to hear about the divorce. They had never liked Ben, the gold digger, from the start. But they were also terrified when Lily told them what my sister-in-law had done. I hugged them tightly and comforted them. "It's all over now. The wicked have been punished." A few days later, Lily heard that my sister-in-law had been diagnosed with multiple illnesses in the psychiatric hospital. After a night of agonizing screams, she had become a shriveled corpse. We were at the mall buying clothes for Mia when we came across a beggar who couldn't speak, had no hands or feet, and whose face was a disfigured mess. Even so, a visceral wave of nausea told me exactly who he was. I casually tossed a single penny his way and walked off, holding Mia close. I looked down at my daughter, whose tiny fingers were wrapped around mine, and made a silent promise. "This time, Mommy will make sure you grow up healthy, strong, and able to achieve all your dreams." The end.